I could eat this like every night. Hi everyone, my name is Danielle Pruitt and I am the founder of Wild and Whole, and I am here in my kitchen in Houston, Texas. So it is the end of summer and I'm doing a recipe that I love because it highlights some of my favorite ingredients. You'll find sweet corn and of course some spicy hatch chili. Those are gonna go into a really robust and flavorful grits, and then I'm gonna top that with some brown savory mushrooms and some soft boiled eggs for a delicious meal for any given weeknight. All right, so we've got our corn husk removed. What I love about these grits is because, you know, they're made of corn. I just wanna like intensify that corn and make them really nice and sweet. This bowl is too small. And so that's why I add corn. I don't add the whole kernel like by cutting it off. I actually like to grate it using a little grater, a box grater, which this grater has been in my family for years. It was a hand-me-down and it's broken, and I have so much fancy equipment, but I still use this broken little grater. So this is great because you're kind of mashing up the corn kernels and then you're getting all that juice in there. That's really nice and sweet. It's like a dessert practically. We're gonna set that aside. That's gonna go into the grits. And then we've also got hatch chili, which I think what's really special about hatch chili is that it's only around for like 2 months out of the year. This is a staple in southwestern US, so like in New Mexico, that's where the great hatch chilies are. But we get some pretty good ones here in Texas, and I always get them roasted. At our grocery stores, they have these huge giant wheels that they turn over an open fire so they blacken, and they get really nice and crispy and charred, and just deepens that flavor. But if you can't get roasted hatch chilies, I mean, you can certainly roast them at home for yourself, or you can get poblanos and roast them on the burner, or you can buy them canned pretty easily. So I've got my chili, I've got it diced up, and I'm only making a half recipe, so I'm gonna save the other half for later. And then I'm gonna add a little bit of yellow onion. This is gonna be diced. And that's because corn is so sweet naturally that I want to make sure that I tone that down just a little bit and make it really savory. So before we cook the grits, I'm gonna saute this onion. Again, I'm doing a half recipe, so I don't need quite all that much onion. And then of course, can't make grits without grits. So I've got about half a cup here. And this is for a half recipe. This is enough to serve 2, which is about how much I eat for these days. And that's all you need. Okay, before we start making the grits or sauteing the mushrooms, I wanna go ahead and get the eggs cooking. So I'm making soft boiled or jammy eggs because they are my favorite. So start with boiling water before you put the eggs in. So I'm gonna let this water come to a boil and grab a ladle. So I make soft boiled eggs all the time, and my favorite way of doing it is to start with boiling water, and then I take my eggs out of the fridge. I don't let it come to room temp. I don't get all scientific with it. I just boil the water, take a ladle, and then just carefully drop them in once the water is boiling. And then as soon as I have all the eggs in there, I set a timer, 6 minutes, 45 seconds. So while the eggs are boiling, I'm gonna go ahead and start prepping the mushrooms. I'm using some oyster mushrooms that technically these fall into the wild mushroom category. even though these are really not wild, they're cultivated commercially. But any kind of mushroom that's got lots of little textures and layers. So I like oysters too because they have really thin fans, and they just have all these little nooks and crannies, and when they brown, and they can just develop more flavor, crisp up nicely, and then they can kind of catch the butter and the garlic and all the stuff that we're making on top of this grits. So it just adds sort of this meaty element and a little bit more of that umami flavor I'm looking for to sort of balance out those grits. So any kind of mushroom, again, will work. Just with oysters, I just tear them apart. It's a great trick. I used to chop and cut all of my mushrooms, and then I heard a hot tip on a Bon Appetit podcast one time. I wish I could remember who said it. I would love to give her credit. But she told me the trick of just tearing mushrooms, because again, you're creating lots of little nooks and crannies for them to start absorbing those flavors. So that's one of the best tips I ever learned when it comes to cooking with mushrooms. And as you can see, these are totally dry. They're not washed or anything, just brush them off clean. They're like sponges. So if you wash them with water, you need to really let them dry out for a good period of time before cooking with them. Otherwise, it just kind of get that rubbery stuff, and nobody really likes that. So make sure your mushrooms are really dry before cooking. I've got a nice big handful. This is what I will cook with today. And the only other ingredient I need for this, I've got some lime. I'm gonna squeeze a little bit of lime juice over the top, and then I'm gonna mince a little garlic to add in there. All right, so make sure that you have an ice bath, ice and water, ready to go before that timer goes off. Ah! It's off, okay. And as soon as that timer goes off, get your eggs out. Stop everything you're doing and take out the eggs. So I leave these in the water basically until they're cool enough to handle. And then the trick here is to give them lots of little gentle taps all the way around. And then give it a little squeeze. And then you can start peeling. So it wants to peel in all these teeny little bitty fragments, and to avoid that, shells have this little bitty skin, like tissue between like the outer shell and the actual egg. Once you get a hold of that, then you can peel the egg so much easier. Ta-da! And so usually I'll make a bunch of eggs all at once, and you can do this a day or two before, so you don't have to do it right before cooking. But I'd like to do this step ahead of time. All right, so now we can start making our grits. The first thing we'll want to do is get a sauce pot hot, something big enough to hold all the grits with all the liquids. Remember, I'm making a half recipe, so I don't have a ton going in here. But if you're doubling this recipe, make sure you're using a bigger sauce pot. And then the first thing we do is to saute our onions till they're nice, golden, and soft. And I'm gonna do that using a little bit of clarified butter or ghee. You can certainly use oil or anything that you have on hand. Either neutral flavored or butter-ish. So when the oil is hot, and you'll know it's hot because it starts to slide around the pan quickly and not slowly, we'll add our onions. And now we'll add in our chilies. Give that a little bit of stir. And then I like to turn this down and then add liquid. Scrape up any bits at the bottom of the pan. And then if you're trying to cook this really fast, bring this to a boil, then add the grits. But I'm gonna go a little bit slower just because I'm gotta cook the mushrooms too. Last but not least, we'll add our corn. Every now and then I'm gonna give this a stir, make sure nothing's sticking to the bottom. And we can get started on the mushrooms. So I wanna saute brown the mushrooms over medium-high heat. So we'll start with getting a pan hot. I'm gonna use clarified butter. And I'm using like a couple heaping spoonfuls. I know it's a lot of butter, but these mushrooms just kind of soak it up. So again, I'll swirl this around, make sure this is hot, and then I'll add the mushrooms in. You should hear that nice sizzling sound that I love. And notice I put it down and I leave it down. Don't touch it, don't mess with it, leave it alone. You gotta let it do its thing. It's gotta brown nicely. And you keep on stirring. You're just gonna start releasing moisture from the mushrooms. And then what's gonna happen is that it starts to sweat. And then it starts to get rubbery. And then you lose that texture. So you wanna leave it alone and let it brown, do its thing. Once you start to see some of these little pieces start to get golden, then you can give the pan a little bit of a shake. See that? That's what you're looking for. Give it a little shake. And then leave it alone again. This is a little hot. I'm gonna turn it down just a tad and just let it be. All right, these are looking gorgeous. I'm actually gonna add a little bit of oregano. I pulled this from the garden, and I'm just gonna put the whole leaves in there and just sort of scatter it around and let that sort of cook in there. And you can also add a little pinch of salt and season it just a little bit. And then lastly, this is some oregano. I'm gonna do just like a pinch. Just like a tiny bit. I just like to put it in my palm and just kind of sprinkle it in. Just a little goes a long way here. And then we'll give it another little shake. This is looking gorgeous. How perfect is this? Oh, I love it. All right, these are getting really nice and brown. So the very last thing I want to add, well, almost last thing, is a little bit of garlic. And garlic doesn't need much. It takes about 30 seconds to maybe a minute until you start to sort of release that fragrance. And this pan's really hot. There's a lot of oil in here and a lot of fat. And so this will start to get nice and crispy. So it doesn't take too long. Just give it a little shake. Our very last step is give it a little squeeze of lime, just a hint of acidity. And that will stop the cooking process, turn the stove off. That acidity will be really nice to counterbalance all the fat. And now these are done. I'm gonna take these off the heat. We are almost ready to plate. So the grits are just about done. They're thickening up. I haven't seasoned them at all, so I'm gonna give them a few good pinches of salt. Stir that around. And before it gets too thick, I'm gonna add some feta cheese. I just like that tanginess, complements it really well to counterbalance some of the sweetness. And I'm gonna do about 2 tablespoons in here. And again, just stir that around. And now we're ready to plate. We are ready to eat. I am starving. I'm going to give just a little bit more lime to these mushrooms. Oh man, they look fantastic. This is so good. Honestly, the best part about this is how crispy these mushrooms got, and like the fried garlic and the sweet corn, the spicy hatch chili, everything is just perfect together. You have to make this.